So welcome, everybody. I'm Kelly Robinson. I'm one of the career advisors in the Matthews Center for Career Development. And it's great to, see everybody on Zoom. I'll have a PowerPoint up later, but if you're inclined to put on your video, that would be awesome while we're chatting. Again, I'm one of the career advisors in the Matthews Center for Career Development. I work specifically with students who are interested in education, nonprofits, government, or policy. And I also serve as the pre-law advisor. So if we haven't had a chance to meet yet in any of those areas or interest areas that you're thinking about, I encourage you to come into the Matthews Center, schedule an appointment so that we can chat about that. But thanks for attending tonight's session, which is the first in our graduate and professional school series, where we are in the first program talking about exploring graduate and professional schools. I took a look at the list of people who attended, and it's cool to see that we've got a variety of everywhere from first year students to seniors who are in the Zoom tonight. Just a couple of housekeeping items as we go. As I mentioned, I am recording this session, and I will be sending out the YouTube link to this session as well as the slide deck that I'll be presenting. So please plan on taking notes if you want, but don't feel like you have to furiously scribble down the slide deck because I will be sending that out to everybody. We're going to save some time at the end for questions. So certainly if you have questions as we go, drop them in the chat and I'll be happy to spend some time on them at the end of the session. I'll offer that the question that you have is probably a question that everybody's asking, but if you'd like to pose it anonymously, feel free to just send it to me directly in the chat, and then I'll go ahead and be able to answer that in the Q&A. So, all right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And as I mentioned, I do have a slide deck that I'd like to share. Thumbs up. Can I get a thumbs up that people can see that? Awesome. Thank you. Just going to move everybody here. Okay. So exploring graduate and professional school programs. So here are the topics that we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to be talking about deciding to pursue graduate studies. How do you decide to pursue? And when do you decide to pursue those studies? How can you go about researching programs? What are some of the application components that you're going to be expected to submit to your graduate schools? And then the ever popular topic of how do you pay for graduate school? So whenever you're talking about graduate school preparation, it's tough to talk about, especially when you have, such a vast audience. I saw a lot of different majors that are represented because the common theme for graduate school planning is it depends. So a lot of the different topics that we'll be talking about tonight, when you meet with somebody to talk about graduate school planning, you kind of have to add that caveat to it. It depends on the program that you're applying to. It depends on when you are applying for that particular program. And so a lot of what we're going to be talking about, if it does seem kind of general, is because really graduate school planning, when it comes down to it, is going to be very specific to either the industry that you're pursuing, whether you're pursuing a master's or a PhD. So just kind of keeping that caveat in mind. But certainly one of the first places to start when you're thinking about graduate school and exploring graduate school is to go or not to go. And, graduate school it's a very, it's a decision that you have to give a lot of thought. One of the biggest differences between graduate school and undergraduate studies is the intentionality. So whenever you pursue an undergraduate degree, there's lots of room for exploration. I may be talking to some seniors here tonight who've perhaps gone through, different majors that they were thinking about or different career ideas. I see some people smiling. With graduate studies, it's anticipated that when you walk into the first day of class of that graduate program, you're ready to hit the ground running. You know why it is that you are there. You know why it is that you want to pursue this particular degree. The aspect of kind of figuring it out as you go, there may be some elements of figuring things out, but there's real intentionality to why you're pursuing that graduate degree. And so you can see the solid reasons. I hate to use the word good and bad, but I like to use, solid and maybe not so solid reasons. So solid reasons to attend graduate school, why you want the degree, really kind of reflect that. Perhaps you have a definite passion for a concentrated area of study. Your targeted professional interest requires a graduate degree. Or perhaps you are in a particular area or in a particular industry, and you know that if you want to advance in that particular career path, you're going to need to pursue that advanced graduate degree. Maybe some of the not so solid reasons that I'll have conversations with students a lot about is they're not sure what it is that they want to do after graduation. And so therefore pursuing graduate school seems like a safe answer to that question of what are you going to do after you graduate? I'm going to go to graduate school. And it sounds very specific and sounds very finite. Perhaps you're not sure that there are job options that exist with your undergraduate degree. Again, there are some particular industries where that graduate degree is going to be necessary to enter that field, but you may be surprised the different types of jobs or opportunities that could be available that either directly relate to your major or perhaps relate to career areas of interest that you have outside of that major. I've heard this. I'm not quite sure if I want to be working yet. And that could be either because there's an element of fear and anxiety, or that could be because I really like the school or the academic setting. And so I think that I would like to continue in my studies. Or perhaps that you are in that world of work and you're unsatisfied with your current job. And so again, going to graduate school sounds like a very specific thing to do, and it's a reason, to go. So probably one of the first things that you want to consider is, what are my reasons for why I want to pursue graduate school? Are they solid reasons, or perhaps are they reasons that I need to give it a little bit more thought? The next question that comes out is, okay, if I'm deciding that I do want to pursue graduate school, do I go now or do I go later? This is a question that I'll get a lot from students. I will have questions, especially of students going into, they're in their junior year right now, who are perhaps interested in law school. And they know that if they want to study directly after graduating from Davidson, that application process really begins the summer between their junior and senior year. So we have conversations about, should I take a bridge year or should I go directly into law school or into graduate school? This is very much a personal decision. So somebody can't tell you what you should or shouldn't do, but I think it's important to weigh the pros and cons of each and figure out what works for you. What I do often say to people is, when it comes to taking a bridge year or gap year, the gap year is what it's often called. I don't personally like that word. Gap kind of sounds like it's sort of a filler, and a bridge year can be an amazing experience. It could lead to something. The bridge year is a common approach. Most people do tend to pursue graduate studies after they have pursued a 1, 2, plus year experience doing something different after graduating from their undergraduate. Sometimes for a graduate program that you might be considering, it's required or strongly recommended. For example, anybody who might be interested in pursuing an MBA or a master's in business administration. Most MBA programs look for their students or their applicants to have a few years of work experience before applying to that particular program. The idea being, it's good to go out and get work experience before you pursue that degree that's going to be applicable to the world of work. It also allows you to take a break from the academic environment. I've had students say to me, I think I want to go to graduate school, but I'm burned out. I've been a student since I was in kindergarten, right? Technically, that's been our title since we were 5 or 6 years old, and I want to do something different. And so that can be a perfectly reasonable explanation to consider taking a bridge year. Exploring options could lead to other career interests. It could help solidify career goals. It could even help steer you in the direction of a particular graduate program that you may not have been considering. A great example that I like to give of this one is a student who I was working with a couple of years ago, who was headstrong in her senior year that she was going to be going to medical school, but she wanted to pursue a bridge year experience. So she did a 1-year fellowship role with the Charlotte Community Health Clinic, which pursue medical school. After that fellowship, she was then hired to work for the Charlotte Community Health Clinic with regard to community public health outreach. So she's now working there a second year, and having just spoken to her this past spring, she plans on actually going back to pursue a degree in nursing, because as she has had the opportunity to have that experience, she feels that that better aligns with how she wants to work in the healthcare setting. I can also give another example of a panel of people, alums who we had present a couple of years ago, who all worked in the avenues of public policy. And what they all had in common was, while they were an undergrad at Davidson, they all had plans to attend law school. And then after graduating from Davidson, they went on to do different fellowship or 1-year work-related experiences. Long story short, they all find themselves working in aspects of policy, but one of them went to law school. Another alum went on to pursue their master's in business. Another alum went on to pursue a degree in public policy, and another alum went on to pursue a degree in public administration. So you never know where that bridge year experience can take you. And then finally, a very real aspect is some people may want to pursue that bridge year because it can help them either make or save money for when they're going to be going on to graduate school. Flip side of that, pursuing graduate school immediately after graduation, sometimes that can work for people. Again, if you have career goals that require heading straight to graduate or professional school, that can be the reason to go. I have heard students say that staying in, quote, student mode, as they call it, right after graduation, they believe that it can help keep them focused on academics. And another reason to possibly consider is, as you grow, you're going to develop different roles. You might become an employee. You might become a partner. Down the road, you might become a parent, and those can impact the abilities to focus and to maintain those graduate studies. So again, there's pros and cons to each, and it's a personal decision for people to make. So whenever you are researching particular graduate or professional programs, I'll always hear students say, I want to attend the best graduate program that I can get into. And so then I'll say to them, after we've had a conversation about how they're from Florida and they love the sun, and North Carolina and the winter is a little bit chilly for them. And then I'll ask them, but what if your best graduate program that you get to get into for the area that you want to study is in Chicago, where you're going to be spending a minimum of 2 years of your life, up to 7 years of your life in a very cold, very windy city. And all of a sudden that gives them some pause. Okay. And it sounds sort of like, well, but it's just 2 years of my life, but it's 2 years of your life. And so there's lots of factors to consider. What I encourage people to do before I start researching, and you may have been given this advice, very likely if you were researching undergraduate institutions, make a list of criteria that's important to you. Because what's important to you may be very different than what's important to other people who you're having conversations with. It may be very different than how the best program, I put that in air quotes, is ranked. And we'll talk about rankings in a little bit. So these are some factors perhaps to consider. Number one, cost. And that again is going to be a very personal item. For some, that's going to be more of an item to consider than others, but the cost of this education. When you are looking at the cost, you want to make sure that you're looking at more than the tuition. You want to look at what's the cost of attendance for a particular program. This is going to include factors like the cost of living for a geographic area that you're looking at. This is going to include housing. So is housing at this particular graduate program, is there on-campus housing or off-campus housing? This is going to include any additional fees, so student fees that come with every particular program, just like in an undergraduate institution. Financial aid that's offered, and we'll get into that later when we talk about, looking at funding for programs. So what would the cost be? Another factor to consider is, do you want to go for a master's degree, or do you plan on pursuing a PhD? And this is where oftentimes I'll have students say to me, probably a PhD, because the more education, the better. And education is great, but you want to make sure, again, getting back to that point of graduate school is very intentional. What's your intention in pursuing the degree that you want to pursue? If you are looking for an advanced degree that is going to help you or get you into the world of work, many industries, a master's degree is what is required. If you're looking at more research or academic faculty positions, then you may find yourself looking at that PhD program. A PhD program is 5 to 7 years, typically geared towards, again, academics and research. A master's program is typically a 2-year program. If you're planning on seeking a master's program, if you know that, then one factor to consider when you're starting to research your schools and research your programs is your particular program predominantly comprised of PhD students? Is it more common for people in that program that you're looking at any particular school to be pursuing a PhD as opposed to a master's? That can impact how much funding might be available, because the PhD students are going to be in that program longer. They're going to tend to snuff up all of the particular funding that might be available. So again, that's a factor to consider. You definitely want to look at environment and campus culture. So again, getting back to that, do I like a cold environment? Do I like a warm environment? Things like, are you looking for, you're going to be spending, if you're first year students, or you have spent, if you're seniors, 4 years at a, small liberal arts college in a suburban setting. Is that setting appealing to you? Do you want to continue that? Or do you want to look at more a large institution in a college setting? Or do you want to look at an urban institution in a city setting? So these are things to be looking at. Campus culture. What's the diversity of the students? What's the student body makeup? Is the graduate program integrated into the undergraduate culture? Georgetown Law, for example, is not located on Georgetown University's campus. University of Pittsburgh's medical school is integrated into University of Pittsburgh's undergraduate campus. So what type of campus and what type of culture are you looking for? Just as much as it's important to pay attention to the ingoing and the admissions information, definitely look at the outcome, because the goal, especially again, if you're thinking about a master's degree, is eventually employment. And so you want to know what career and professional development opportunities are available for you. Is there resources available for you while you're a graduate student in this program to be developing professionally? Is there funding that's available for you to attend conferences? Is there opportunities for you to do research, to perhaps assist in publications? What resources are available for job searching and career assistance when you're getting ready to graduate? And then thinking about whatever other topics might be important to you. So again, it's going to depend on what you're personally looking for. Do these resources, if we're thinking down the road, do they include family members? Are you going to be bringing, a spouse or a family with you that there have to be resources for them, excuse me? Do you need to be looking at healthcare resources for you? Is that something that you have to consider? So it's really important to think about your criteria before you start researching the program, so you can know how to factor, what to look for. Next up is resources for researching programs. So there's many different resources that you can take a look at. Probably should have listed the online sites first, because I think that's kind of one of the first areas that you can go to just for your general, I just want to start doing some research. You can see I have these when I'll send the slide deck to you. These are hyperlinked to petersons.com, gradschools.com, graduateguide.com. Those are great websites just to go to start to do some initial research. US News and World Report. the rankings. I talk about that a lot, especially when it comes to, to graduate, I'm sorry, to, to law schools. US News and World Report has a lot of people interested in their publication at least once a year when they come out with all of the rankings for all of the different undergraduate and graduate and professional programs. I know that people look at rankings, so I'm not going to say don't look at rankings. Here's the thoughts that I have that I would offer with regard to rankings. It can be a great way to get information about what are considered top schools in a particular field. However, I think what it's important to keep in mind is that, number one, the criteria to evaluate graduate and professional school programs is not continually updated. So the criteria that they use from year to year is the same. I know for law schools, for example, I know the top 5 before they even come out because they don't tend to fluctuate that much because the criteria that they're using really hasn't kept up with the times, so to speak. If, diversity is something that is important to you, that's not a factor that is used in US News and World Report when they are evaluating programs for how to rank them. Number 2, this is an external group. So it's kind of backwards of what I was just saying in terms of making a list of priorities that is important to you. Ranking systems are comprised of 1, an external group of people who 2, determine what they think is important in ranking a graduate program. And so what they're considering to be important may not necessarily be what's important to you. And then 3, just like with anywhere, data can be manipulated and we can use it to our advantage or disadvantage of however it is that we want to present information. So rankings, US News and World Report rankings can be a great way just to get a list of schools, but I would take away those numbers and just kind of use them with a grain of salt. There are some other fantastic resources that you can and should be using to rank the particular, or I'm sorry, to research the particular programs that you're going to be applying to. First and foremost, you need to be talking to faculty here at Davidson, or perhaps even faculty in your areas of interest. So if you are an environmental studies major and you have an interest possibly in environmental studies, you want to be talking to your faculty here at Davidson because number 1, you can find out what graduate programs they pursued. Number 2, you can find out from them, their peers, what graduate studies have they pursued outside of that area. If you have particular programs of interest, talk to the faculty who are at that particular program. So not only does that give you the opportunity to learn about that graduate program that you might be interested in, take a look at that faculty's bio to see where they did their graduate studies prior to coming to that school. That can be a great way to start to generate a list of graduate programs. You also want to be talking to Davidson alums, especially if you are pursuing a master's degree, perhaps to the world of work. I mentioned talking to and having career conversations with Davidson alums in 90% of the appointments that I have. And I've listed 2 resources here where you can definitely get in contact with alums. The first one is Davidson Connect. The second one is LinkedIn. No need to raise your hand, but I hope that I would see hands raised if we were in a classroom of people who are familiar with LinkedIn. And if you are familiar with it and you have an account, a LinkedIn profile, that's great. If you're not, I would make that an action item. Even if you are in your first year, become familiar with LinkedIn because it's going to be a tremendous tool that you're going to be using. Davidson Connect, if you're not familiar with that particular platform, again, you can see it's hyperlinked. Davidson Connect is a online platform where alums can connect with other alums as well as students. And while I have yet to meet a Davidson alum who's not willing to have a career conversation with somebody, there is specifically in Davidson Connect a mentor section where members of the community have elected to be career resources for Davidson students and alums. So they'll indicate they're willing to have a career conversation, willing to connect you with others, willing to review a resume, etc. These can be tremendous resources for talking to people, who are working in jobs that you think look of interest to you. When you're looking at their profile in LinkedIn or their bio in Davidson Connect, you can see the different types of experiences that they've had and graduate programs that they have attended and graduated from. There was also a section in the mentoring section if you are interested in searching for alums in particular graduate degrees. So if you would like to see somebody who has pursued graduate studies in public health, you can look that up in either Davidson Connect or LinkedIn. So another great resource for you to find particular programs of interest. Current students or alums at your schools of interest. So if you think you have an interest in Emory University's public health program, look that up in LinkedIn, look it up in Davidson Connect, see alums who have attended, or contact that particular admissions department to inquire about having conversations with current students in the program. Finally, a fantastic resource is what are called professional associations. And I'm not sure if anybody, if there's some people here who are not familiar with them. I know I hadn't heard of them until I actually started doing research for graduate studies. Professional associations are organizations that represent particular industries. So for every profession that's out there, there is a representing organization, which is called either an association, it could be called a society, sometimes it's called an institute, that serves as kind of like the central hub for everything related to that particular industry. And it's a fantastic resource for one, just learning about that particular industry. So if you might be interested in physical therapy, the Physical Therapy Professional Association is a great place to go to learn about that particular industry. And very oftentimes the industry websites, the association websites will have a specific link for students that if there is graduate studies that is often associated with that particular profession, will have great information about particular graduate programs. When I was considering graduate school for my particular field, which one, I took a bridge year, and two, I wasn't familiar with what graduate studies were necessary. I started to do some research and found the Professional Association for Student Affairs Administrators, which is what career counseling serves under the umbrella of. And that's how I found an entire list of particular graduate study programs for me to take a look at. So the link that I provided here is actually a link where you can search from A to Z for different professional associations. So that's a fantastic website that I would definitely check out. So once we start researching and once we start finding a list of programs, then we get into the application process and the components. And again, getting back to that second or third slide that we had, it depends. So the application process really depends on the type of graduate program that you're applying to, meaning the particular industry. It also depends if you're applying for a master's program versus a PhD program. It's going to be different if you're applying for arts versus science versus business. So again, it's all going to be very specific to those areas. But just kind of some general things that you will perhaps be coming across. Some particular graduate programs or professional programs, they might utilize a standard application service. So if you are applying to medical school, law school, dental school, physical therapy school, for example, you will be using a standardized application service, very similar to Common App. If you used Common App for your undergraduate applications, where all of your application materials are pretty much sent to this standardized application service, and you then use that application service to send out your materials to the different schools, in addition to the specific applications that you may have for the schools themselves. You may have standardized tests. Typically, the standardized test that you're going to be taking for your graduate studies is going to be the Graduate Record Exam, or the GRE. And it's common for many programs across a variety of disciplines. I always like to mention my husband pursued a master's in economics. I pursued a master's in counselor education. we both took the GRE. Okay. And so the GRE, it's just some general items about this particular test. There's the general test that everybody takes, very similar, I think, to that, to the SAT and the ACT. You have the verbal reasoning, the quantitative section, and the analytical writing section. Something that's a little bit different now with the GRE is, one, they do have testing centers where a GRE is offered year round. But two, in light of COVID, they still continue to offer the test at home option, which that's pretty much available around the clock, 7 days a week. You have to have certain equipment requirements, that you need to meet with regard to, computer, etc. But if you want to take the GRE at 2 a.m. on a Saturday, you can do that through the test at home option. If you are planning on pursuing graduate studies in chemistry, math, physics, or psychology, there is a subject test that you will be asked to likely complete as part of that standardized test. And this is not required by all graduate programs in those particular disciplines, and it's only offered at testing locations. So that one, you can't take the chem test at 2 a.m. on a Saturday in your home. There are some particular graduate programs that, like undergraduate institutions, have gone test optional. So again, that's going to depend on the program that you're looking at. Letters of recommendation, you're going to be asked to write letters of recommendation. I can say that if you are applying within, right out of undergrad or within 1 to 2 years of graduating from undergrad, typically your graduate programs are going to look for your letters to come from faculty or professors. So especially for undergraduate students, take the opportunity to get to know your professors here at Davidson, so then you can call upon them to write those letters of recommendation when you want. You'll be asked to submit a resume or a CV, which is a curriculum vitae. A CV is typically going to be used more for applications to more science or research-based graduate programs. Resume is going to be typically that 1 to 2 page document that you may be accustomed to. You may also be asked to write a personal statement or a statement of purpose. We could do a whole session on personal statement or statement of purpose. And in fact, if you do find a session, I think we might be offering that either later this semester or next semester. There's definitely tips and strategies with regard to the personal statement and statement of purpose. I think the biggest tip that I'll give right here is just pay attention to what it is that you're being asked to write. A personal statement is going to be very much more reflective, much more personal. It's just, tell me about yourself and tell me about your goals, and let's get to know you as an applicant for our program. A statement of purpose is very much that. It is, please tell me your intentions. What is your purpose with regard to pursuing this particular graduate degree and perhaps pursuing it at our college or our university? And then finally, you may be asked to participate in an interview. Interviews may come at any stage of the application. It could be with regard to all students are interviewed. It may be an interview for scholarship considerations, but that is something that could come along with the application process. All right. Graduate school funding. Again, thinking back to intentionality, graduate school is mentally, academically, and financially challenging. And so I encourage you to look into particular options with regard to graduate school funding. I like to list here the different types of funding that you can find with regard to graduate programs. And again, it's going to depend on the type of program that you're applying to. Bottom bullet point, again, we'll start from there with regard to loans. I think that's something that, there are some here who are probably accustomed to that FAFSA form, the federal free, what is it, a federal application for, financial aid or whatever it is, the acronym. I'm sorry, it's late in the evening. But You'll be filling that out. You know, if you're going to be applying for, for student loans, that's going to be a particular form that you're going to be filling out for graduate school. So very similar to if you filled it out for undergraduate. And then there's also perhaps, private loans. Be on the lookout for scholarships. You may have attended a similar program when you were a senior in high school or a junior in high school, where they talked about all the different scholarship opportunities. You may have scholarships or fellowships that are school-based. So there may be particular fellowships or scholarships at that college or university. There may be particular fellowships or scholarships at that particular graduate program. So for example, University of Chicago may have fellowships or scholarships that are open to all graduate students who apply. And then a particular graduate program at U of Chicago may have, scholarship opportunities. There can be diversity or identity-based scholarship opportunities. Lots of independent organizations have, scholarship or fellowship opportunities. What I hear so often is that at the end of an academic year, there is more money that's left on the table that hasn't been claimed, because it does take some time. It takes some time to do some research. So again, faculty members can be a great resource. Professional associations can be a great resource. As you are starting to research and apply to particular programs, as you are offered particular opportunities for admission, do not hesitate to ask about scholarship and fellowship opportunities. And then finally, one that is, very specific to graduate school, that is oftentimes more found for PhD students, but doesn't mean that it couldn't be for masters, because again, it could depend on the program, is what are called assistantships. And so if you attend a, kind of typical at a large university. So I'll use my university as an example. I graduated undergrad from University of Pittsburgh, what I referenced before. And so many of my particular classes, especially when I was in a first or a second year, we had the large lecture, and then that met a couple of times a week. And then we would have what's called a recitation that would meet once a week. And the recitation was taught by a teaching assistant. That teaching assistant was a graduate student in that particular program who was being paid, and their tuition was being paid for in light of them being a teaching assistant. So you could have a teaching assistant, or you could have a research assistant, again, more likely with these science programs, where you might be doing research with a faculty member. And as part of that research, you are receiving a stipend, receiving payment, or your tuition is being paid for. So continue to look for particular opportunities when it comes to this funding. Finally, want to wrap up with, in addition to programs like this that we're offering, how can our office, the Matthews Center, how can we assist you when it comes to doing research, having questions about graduate school? So whether you're a first-year student or going through a senior, and I've had questions about graduate school from each academic year along the way. I think first and foremost, career advising. So like I mentioned before, it's really important to know why it is that you want to go to graduate school. I have had, conversations with first-year students who come in and talk about their entire plan that outlines for the next 8 years about wanting to go to graduate school. And so we really want to have a conversation about that to see, okay, how is that going to play out? And sometimes they'll come back in their sophomore year and plans have changed. So career advising, if you're thinking in your senior year, should I be taking a bridge year? Should I be going straight on to graduate school? If I'm thinking about going into this particular profession, what type of graduate school should I be looking at? So career advising can definitely assist with answers to those questions. I'd like to point out that the Matthews Center does have professional development funding available for students who meet financial need that they can apply to. And I recommend to anybody to just apply. Professional development funding is something that can be used towards your professional development while you are a student at Davidson. Where it can come into play with regards to graduate or professional school is if you are seeking funding to help offset costs of application fees, offset costs of test fees, or test prep if you feel like if you'd like to take a test prep course for the LSAT, the MCAT, the GRE. There is professional development funding that is available that you could consider applying to that could help offset the costs of that. Wanted to add here with regard to the cost, whenever you are reaching out to particular programs, ask for a fee waiver. Can't hurt. Asking for a fee waiver, I've had some students say, but isn't that going to make my application look bad? Do they keep track of that? The answer is no and no. The only thing that can happen is they could say, no, I'm sorry, we have certain criteria that you would not fit for, but if you don't ask, you're not going to know, and you already know the answer is no. So I encourage people, ask for a fee waiver. But if there's, fees that are going to, you are going to have fees for the graduate application process. So you can consider looking at the professional development funding. I'll hyperlink this before I send off this slide deck to you guys. The information is available in the Handshake resources section. We also help with reviewing personal statements or statements of purpose. In my role as, pre-law advisor, this is my time of year when I'm reading a lot of personal statements for students who are applying to law school. But all of us in our particular areas can help you with regard to reviewing those particular statements or essays. And again, we can help with regard to reviewing your resume or your CV. If you find out that you have an interview coming up for the application to graduate school, or if you're applying for a scholarship or a fellowship and there's an interview component to it, please come and talk to us. At the very least, come and meet with a career advisor just to talk about the interview process if you have some questions about that. We also offer what are called mock interviews. Again, you can schedule that as an appointment through Handshake. A mock interview is where you would sit down with a career advisor and actually role play the interview, where the career advisor would ask questions that you might anticipate being asked in that particular interview, and then we would review it. We would talk about, how your answers were, what are some strategies for maybe rethinking some answers that you gave to questions. It's just a great way to be able to practice the actual interview in a safe, just kind of comfortable, relaxed environment. And then finally, as you're getting these admission offers in, if you are receiving admission offers, if you are being waitlisted, how do you evaluate your different admission offers? Come and talk to a career advisor because we can help kind of walk through that process. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I didn't see any questions in the chat. While that could mean that I'm so brilliant and I've answered every single question that you have, I'm seriously doubting that. And so again, if you want to put your videos on, if there are any questions that you have, we'll just give it a minute to either raise your hand and be brave and offer them here, or you can certainly put them in the chat as well. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I will give you 15 minutes back. I appreciate everybody coming tonight. I hope that you found the information helpful. Again, I will be sending out the slide deck and I'll probably get that YouTube video up tomorrow. So I'll look for both of those emails coming out tomorrow. You can reach me at kerobinson@davidson.edu if you want to email me questions. Also like to offer that if you'd like to stop by and see me during drop-ins, my drop-in hours are usually Tuesday afternoons from 1 to 5. So if you have questions with regard to graduate schools, since we were talking about this topic tonight, or any questions related to those, to areas that I had that I advised, or resumes, cover letters, interviews, just stop by and see me. Have a great evening, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.